I thought the cabin was abandoned until I saw the fresh, muddy footprints leading straight inside. There were no prints coming out. I'd gone hiking alone that weekend, something I liked to do whenever city life felt too heavy. The trail I followed wasn't official. It was one of those faint deer paths you find if you know where to look. I'd been walking for hours when I saw it. A cabin, tucked between a wall of pines, weathered wood blending almost perfectly with the shadows. At first, it looked like something left behind decades ago, roof sagging, boards grayed from years of rain. But the mud in front of the door told a different story. A single line of barefoot prints pressed deep into the wet soil, each one so crisp it looked like it had been made minutes earlier. They led up to the cabin door, and that was it. No return trail. I stopped in my tracks, my chest tightening. Maybe someone lived out here, some hermit avoiding the world. Maybe a lost hiker had stumbled inside. I told myself anything that made sense, because the longer I stared, the more the silence around me seemed to grow heavier. I thought about turning back, but curiosity has a way of pushing past good judgment. Against my better instincts, I walked closer. The air grew colder near the cabin, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. I climbed the short set of broken steps and stood before the door. It was shut, but not locked. The handle hung crooked, splintered wood framing it. I listened. Nothing. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that if I opened it, something or someone would be on the other side. I don't know what I expected to find when I pushed the door. The hinges groaned, echoing unnaturally loud. Inside, dust floated in thin shafts of light coming through cracks in the roof. The place smelled like damp earth and mold, but underneath it was something faintly metallic, sharp like rust or blood. The floor was coated in a thin layer of dirt, and that's where I saw them again. The same barefoot prints. Only now, they weren't just leading in. They continued across the room, pressing deeper into the dirt floorboards, darker in some spots where moisture had collected. They stopped in the far corner of the cabin. I froze. The corner was empty, just shadow against broken boards. The prints went straight into the darkness and ended, as if whoever made them had walked into the wall and vanished. The silence inside was crushing. My pulse thudded in my ears. I told myself I'd look for a few seconds more and then leave. But my eyes kept drifting back to that corner, convinced something was hiding there, just barely out of sight. That's when I heard it. Not a movement, not a shuffle. A breath. Soft. Slow. Inhale. Exhale. It was coming from the corner. Every hair on my body stood up. I backed toward the door, careful not to make a sound. The wooden floor creaked anyway, sharp and accusing. The breathing paused. And then, so faint I almost convinced myself I imagined it, came the sound of a bare foot sliding forward across the boards. That broke me. I bolted. Out the door, down the steps, into the trees. Branches whipped at my arms as I ran, mud sucking at my boots. I didn't care which direction I went. I just needed distance. I didn't stop until the light between the trees grew brighter, and I stumbled back onto the trail I'd abandoned earlier. My chest burned, lungs screaming for air, but I didn't dare slow down. The woods behind me felt alive, pressing closer with every step. I finally reached my car near dusk, legs shaking so badly I nearly dropped the keys. I didn't look back at the tree line as I pulled away, though I felt eyes on me the whole drive. That night, safe, or at least I thought I kept replaying the image of those prints in my mind. The way they had stopped in the corner. The sound of breathing in a space that looked empty. But the worst part came later. When I kicked off my boots in the motel, I noticed something smeared across the floor mat. At first, I thought it was just mud from the trail, but the shape was too clean. It was a footprint, bare, and it wasn't mine. It wasn't the woods themselves that scared me that night. It was the way the doll's glassy eyes followed us, even when we swore it hadn't moved. It started as just a late evening hike with 3 friends me, Chris and Jean. The kind of stupid, let's take a shortcut through the woods idea that comes out of boredom. We'd parked near an old service road and cut into the trees, planning to make it back to the main trail before dark. But as the sun dipped lower, the forest grew heavy with that strange silence you only notice when it's too late. The kind where every twig snapping underfoot feels like it echoes. That's when we saw it. At first, I thought it was just trash caught on a tree, but as we got closer, it became clear. A doll. It was nailed straight into the trunk, about 4 feet up. Its arms dangled limp, its dress was torn and filthy, and one glass eye was cracked, clouded over. The other was disturbingly intact, gleaming faintly even in the dying light. "Who the hell does that?" Chris muttered, running a hand across the rough bark. The nail through the doll's chest looked old, rust streaking down its plastic skin. I laughed uneasily, trying to play it off. Some weirdo messing around. Probably just a prank. Jeanne shook her head. "This isn't funny. Look at its face." We all did. The doll's mouth was fixed in a faint smile, but it wasn't the expression that made my stomach knot. It was the way it seemed to be angled toward me, specifically. We started walking again, brushing it off as just another creepy thing in the woods. But after a few steps, Chris stopped dead. "Wait, did it just turn?" We spun back. The doll was still nailed in place, but the head slightly, subtly, wasn't facing the same direction as before. Its good eye now looked squarely at Chris. We all went quiet. I tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. "It's just the angle. You're imagining it." "Am I?" Chris muttered. He circled around the tree, and as soon as he moved behind it, the doll's head slow, deliberate shifted. Its eye followed him. Jeanne gasped, backing away. Nope, that's not possible." I felt my skin crawl. The head hadn't jerked or snapped. It had slid, like it was alive, tracking him. And when Chris froze in place, so did the doll. We should have left then. We all knew it. But there's something about fear that makes you linger, like you need to prove it's not real. So I stepped behind the tree, keeping my eyes locked on the doll's face. Slowly, its head rotated again, creaking faintly until its gaze locked on me. I swear the air grew colder. My breath came out in quick, shaky clouds, even though it hadn't been that cold a moment ago. "Okay," I said, forcing a nervous laugh. "This is some kind of trick. Maybe magnets or wires." But my words trailed off. The nail through the doll was buried deep in solid wood. There was no mechanism, no trick. Just that unblinking eye, watching me like it knew something I didn't. "Let's go," Jeanne said firmly. "Now." We didn't argue. We left the tree behind, moving quicker than before, hearts pounding. But the forest felt wrong after that, as if the shadows leaned closer, as if the silence was heavier. Then came the sound, a faint creak, like wood under pressure. Behind us, Chris turned, his flashlight beam jittering. The light caught the doll, still nailed to the tree far behind us. Only now, it wasn't facing the tree line anymore. It was facing down the trail. Toward us. We didn't stop again. We ran, stumbling over roots, branches snapping underfoot. Every few minutes, I swore I heard the faint squeal of something turning, always behind us, always following. By the time we broke out of the woods near the road, we were gasping, panicked, barely speaking. None of us looked back. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw its face, that cracked glass eye, the way its head turned with impossible patience. The worst part came a week later. I went to throw out some trash one night, stepping onto my porch, and sitting on the railing, waiting for me, was a doll. Same cracked eye, same faint smile, and though I froze, heart hammering, I could swear on my life it wasn't facing me at first. It turned, slowly, until it did. The tent should have been empty, but when I pulled the zipper down, something inside whispered my name. I was camping alone in the northern woods of Maine, miles away from the nearest marked trail. That's how I liked it. Silence, isolation, just me and the fire. The first night passed without issue, but on the second day, I wandered deeper into the forest than I had planned. The trees grew thicker there, sunlight reduced to a pale green haze through the canopy. That's when I noticed it. A tent. It stood in a small clearing, leaning slightly, its fabric bleached by the sun and streaked with mildew. At first, I thought it was abandoned, a leftover from some long-ago camping trip. But something about it stopped me. It didn't look that old. The stakes were still firm in the dirt. The flap was zipped shut. I called out just in case. My voice sounded small in the stillness. No reply. Curiosity got the better of me. I walked closer, crunching over dead leaves. The tent gave off a faint, sour smell-stale air, damp nylon. My stomach twisted, but I reached for the zipper anyway. The sound of it peeling down was louder than it should have been, like it was cutting into the silence. And then, my name, soft, whispered, from inside. I froze, heart hammering so violently it made my vision blur. No one should have known I was there. No one should have even known my name. Before I could react, the entire tent collapsed. The poles bent inward with a metallic groan, the fabric folding in on itself as if something inside had pulled it down. I stumbled backward, tripping over roots, flashlight shaking in my grip. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't work. I could only stare as the tent sagged into a shapeless heap. Nothing moved. No sound followed. Finally, I forced myself to breathe, forcing logic into my head. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe some animal had been inside, and my mind twisted the sound. I backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off the pile of fabric. Then I turned and hurried back toward my own camp, but the forest wasn't the same anymore. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves set my nerves on fire. I felt watched. When I reached my camp, dusk was already setting in. I lit my fire fast, tossing in extra wood to keep it burning bright. The tent I'd seen kept replaying in my mind. That whisper. The way it had known me. I decided I'd leave at first light. But night has a way of stretching when you're afraid. The forest around me was restless branches tapping, something shuffling just beyond the firelight. I sat awake, clutching a knife I usually kept for cooking. Around midnight, I heard it again. The zipper. Not mine, not close, faint, distant. Somewhere out there in the woods, the sound of a tent being slowly, deliberately unzipped. I stood, scanning the tree line, but the darkness was too heavy. The sound stopped. Then came the whisper. My name, floating through the trees, closer now. My fire crackled, shadows shifting like figures at the edge of the light. I backed toward my tent, pulse racing. My mind screamed leave, but it was pitch black. If I ran, I'd be blind in the woods, and then movement. I spun, and my blood went cold. At the edge of the clearing, half collapsed and dragging through the dirt, was the same tent I'd seen earlier. Only now, it wasn't in its clearing, it was here, pulled forward by something unseen, crumpling, folding, inching closer. The flap peeled open on its own. The darkness inside looked deeper than the night around it. And then the voice came again, a whisper, stretched into something almost gleeful. Come in. I didn't think. I grabbed my pack, kicked dirt over the fire, and ran. Branches whipped my face. Roots snagged my legs, but I didn't stop. I ran until my lungs burned, until the forest thinned, and I saw the faint glow of the highway. I didn't go back for my gear. I didn't go back at all. Even now, sometimes, When the night is especially quiet, I swear I can hear it again. That faint, dragging unzip of fabric, and the whisper curling just behind it, always saying my name. It didn't move like a person, but its head tilted with me, as if it had been waiting for me all along. I was hunting alone in the fall, deep in the backwoods where the map thins out into nothing but ridges and valleys. A kind of woods where you can walk a whole day and not see another human being. That's exactly why I liked it. No distractions, just the trees, the cold air, and the chance of spotting a buck. That morning, fog clung low to the ground. My boots crunched over frosted leaves as I made my way up a ridge. I remember stopping to catch my breath, rifle resting on my shoulder, when something caught my eye. It stood about 20 yards off the trail, halfway up a slope. At first, I thought it was a scarecrow. The shape was human, slouched, head tilted slightly down. The clothes looked tattered, hanging off a frame that seemed too thin. What unsettled me most was the way it was positioned, leaning against a tree, like it had been propped there deliberately. I figured maybe some landowner put it up to keep people from trespassing. Still, it was odd. There weren't any farms for miles. I was about to keep walking when I noticed it. The head. It wasn't pointed straight down anymore. It was tilted, just slightly, toward me. I froze, staring. The fog swirled at its base, obscuring its legs, but the longer I looked, the more wrong it seemed. Its proportions weren't quite right. The arms too long, the shoulders hunched unnaturally high. I took a step to the side, trying to convince myself I was just seeing it from a weird angle. The head shifted again, slow, deliberate, following me. My chest tightened. I raised my rifle, not to fire, but to get a closer look through the scope. My hands trembled as the crosshair steadied on its face, except there was no face. Just a smooth expanse where features should have been, like burlap stretched too tight or skin without detail. No eyes, no mouth, just blank. I lowered the scope immediately, breath clouding in front of me. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to leave it alone. But I couldn't. I was rooted in place, locked in a silent standoff with something that shouldn't have been there. The woods grew unnervingly quiet. Not a single bird, not a single branch creaked. Just me and the thing on the slope. I forced myself to move, circling wide, pretending I hadn't seen it. My boots pressed soft against the leaves, careful, cautious. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw its head turn with me, always angled toward me. When I finally crested the ridge and lost sight of it, I let out a shaky laugh, trying to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Just a scarecrow, just a trick of the fog. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Hours passed as I tried to focus on hunting, but I found myself constantly glancing over my shoulder. The woods no longer felt empty. Every tree seemed to conceal something. By late afternoon, I decided I'd had enough. I headed back toward the truck, following the ridge trail downhill. That's when I saw it again. Closer this time. It was standing at the bottom of the slope, not leaning now, but upright, perfectly still. The same blank face angled toward me. My stomach dropped. There was no way it had moved. Not without me hearing it. I gripped my rifle tighter, fighting the urge to aim again. Instead, I walked faster. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. The trail curved, and for a moment, I lost sight of it. When I rounded the bend, it was there again, standing in the middle of the path. No sound, no movement, just there. I stopped, every nerve in my body screaming. The fog thickened, curling around its legs, making it look like it was floating. "Stay back," I muttered, though my voice cracked. My finger hovered near the trigger. The head tilted again, slow and deliberate. That broke me. I didn't fire. I didn't test what would happen. I ran. crashing through brush, scraping my arms on branches, lungs burning. I didn't care about the trail anymore. I just needed to get out. By the time I reached my truck, the sun was gone. I slammed the door, locked it, and sat there trembling, staring into the tree line. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, just before I turned the key in the ignition, I saw it. At the far edge of the clearing, just barely visible in the glow of my headlights. Standing, still, watching, its head tilted to the side, like it was curious how far I thought I could run. I thought it was a person trapped under the leaves, until the ground itself whispered back to me. I was hiking alone that afternoon, cutting through a stretch of dense undergrowth near the edge of a state park. The official trail had curved away miles back, but I'd been restless, itching to explore something less worn down by tourists. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of wet soil and pine needles, and every step through the thick brush made me feel like I was intruding somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. That's when I heard it. Help. Faint, fragile, almost drowned out by the rustle of my boots. I froze. The voice had come from somewhere close, low to the ground. At first, I thought maybe it was a trick of the wind, the way it whistled through trees. But then it came again, a little louder. Please, help me. My stomach dropped. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the trees, the brush. Nothing. Then I saw the mound. Just ahead, in a small clearing, was a pile of leaves unnaturally high, as if someone had raked them together and dumped them in a heap. I felt a chill ripple up my back. The sound had come from there. I approached carefully, each step crunching against the damp ground. The closer I got, the colder the air felt, though the sun still hung high above the trees. I crouched down, heart hammering, and called out. Hello? Are you under there? Silence. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it. Then, muffled, almost right against the dirt. Please, don't leave me. That was enough. I dropped to my knees and began to dig. My fingers clawed through damp leaves, tossing them aside. A wave of rotten earth rose into my nose, making me gag, but I kept going. I expected to feel skin or fabric or even bone. Instead, I uncovered a hole. It wasn't big at first, just wide enough for both my hands to fit, but it went straight down. The edges were packed with damp soil, too smooth and perfect to be an animal burrow. I leaned closer, peering into the dark. It looked endless. I called down into it, voice trembling. Hello? For a long second, nothing. Then the voice came back, drifting up from the darkness. Closer? My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't right. The voice didn't sound panicked anymore. It sounded calm, measured, almost expectant. I scrambled back, dirt clinging to my palms. The hole gaped silently where the leaves had been, like it was waiting. That's when the ground around it shifted. Just a little, like something deep below had moved. I heard the faintest scrape, like fingernails dragging against packed earth. I bolted. Branches whipped at my face as I tore through the brush, lungs burning, not caring which direction I went, as long as it was away from that clearing. I didn't stop until I burst back onto the main trail, shaking and covered in dirt. I told myself it had to be some kind of weird natural formation, a sinkhole, an echo chamber carrying voices from somewhere else, anything but what it had felt like. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that voice, calm, patient, closer. The next morning, I checked the news, half expecting to read about a missing hiker being found. Nothing. No reports. But 3 days later, I noticed something outside my window. A small mound of leaves, right by the edge of my yard. And as I stared at it in disbelief, I swear I heard the faintest whisper rise with the breeze. Please help me. I thought I was alone in the woods that night, until the lantern appeared, glowing faintly through the trees. I'd been hiking longer than I should have, trying to squeeze in just a few more miles before setting up camp. By the time I realized how dark it had gotten, the trail had already disappeared into shadows. I flicked on my headlamp, the beam cutting a narrow path through the dense trees, and told myself I'd stop at the next clearing. That's when I saw it. Through the trees ahead, there was another light. Not bright like a flashlight, but soft, flickering like a lantern. Relief washed over me at first. Maybe another hiker had set up camp nearby. I could ask if they minded me setting up close, maybe even share a fire. But as I drew closer, something about the light felt off. It was too steady for a fire, too warm for an LED. It pulsed faintly, like it was alive. The clearing opened up, and there it was, an old lantern, the kind with a glass globe and a metal handle, hanging from a branch about 6 feet off the ground. Its glow painted the clearing in an amber light, but there was no pack, no tent, no person. Just the lantern, swaying slightly, though the air was still. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the emptiness. No answer. I stepped forward cautiously. My boots crunched against dead leaves, and the sound seemed to echo. The lantern flickered. For a moment, I thought I saw something move in the shadows just beyond it. But when I aimed my headlamp, there was nothing. I reached out, just a few feet away now, and the lantern went out. The clearing plunged into black. I spun, headlamp beam jerking wildly through the trees, my pulse hammered in my ears. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. Then, behind me light. I whipped around. The lantern was glowing again. Only now, it wasn't hanging in the clearing anymore. It was deeper in the woods. Behind me. I stumbled back, panic surging. There was no way I had passed it. It had moved. I told myself to keep calm, that maybe someone was messing with me. But the nearest trailhead was miles away. Who would drag a lantern through the woods at night, silently, without ever answering me? The glow hovered between the trees, steady and patient, like it was waiting. I turned and ran. My headlamp bounced, throwing light across trunks and branches. But no matter how far I went, the feeling of being followed pressed close behind me. After what felt like forever, I risked a glance over my shoulder. The lantern was there, hanging in the distance, always the same distance, always swaying gently. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs threatened to give out. Finally, I spotted a rock outcropping and scrambled onto it, crouching low, trying to catch my breath. The woods were silent again, except for the pounding of my heart. I shut off my headlamp, hoping darkness would hide me. My eyes strained against the black. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then the glow appeared, closer than before, just at the edge of the rocks. It didn't sway this time. It held perfectly still, casting a faint amber circle across the ground. And then I heard it. A sound so soft it made my skin crawl. A breath, slow, drawn out, coming from the direction of the lantern. I stayed frozen, too terrified to move, barely daring to breathe. I don't know how long I crouched there, but when I finally blinked, the light was gone. Just gone. I waited until dawn before I climbed down. My legs shook the entire walk back to the trailhead. I never once looked back. But even now, when I close my eyes, I can still see that glow in the trees, still hear that faint, patient breathing. And sometimes, on nights when my house is quiet and the wind dies down, I swear I see a flicker of amber light outside my window, waiting. We thought it was just an old notebook buried in the dirt, until we read the last page and saw it was dated that very day. It happened when I was 17. Me and 3 friends, Mark, Tyler, and Jess, had decided to camp in the woods behind Tyler's property. It wasn't anything extreme, just teenage boredom, and the thrill of being out there alone with no parents. By late afternoon, we'd hiked further than usual, looking for a spot to set up camp. That's when Jess noticed something half buried near the roots of an old oak tree. She kicked at it with her boot, and the corner of a leather cover peeked through the dirt. It was a journal. The cover was cracked, stained, and water-damaged, but the pages inside were surprisingly dry. Tyler brushed the dirt away, grinning. "Treasure," he said, flipping it open. But the handwriting wasn't what we expected. The entries were frantic, messy. Page after page described someone wandering through the very same woods, convinced they were being followed. The words repeated themselves in strange patterns. "Watched from the trees. Watched from the trees." Some pages had the phrase written dozens of times, as if whoever wrote it couldn't think about anything else. We laughed at first, the way teenagers do. Mark joked that it was some creepypasta someone had written and buried on purpose. But the deeper we read, the less funny it became. One passage stuck with me. "They never come closer in the daylight, but I can feel them. At night, they move. I hear them circling. They are patient. They want me to know I'm not alone." I remember Jess snapping the book shut, her face pale. "This is seriously messed up." That's when Tyler noticed the date on the last entry. It wasn't from years ago. It wasn't even from months ago. It was written that same day. The words read, "If anyone finds this, they'll know I wasn't imagining it. They're watching right now." We all went silent. The woods around us suddenly felt too still, the air heavy. The sun was dipping lower, shadows stretching long between the trees. "Someone's screwing with us," Mark said, though his voice wasn't as confident as usual. "They planted this here." But Jess shook her head. "Then where are they? Why bury it?" That's when we heard it. A snap of a branch, close. All of us froze. My eyes darted between the trees, searching for movement. Nothing. Just shadows stacked on shadows. And another snap. This time from the opposite side. We spun, hearts hammering. The woods were too dense to see more than a few feet in any direction. But the sound wasn't just random, it felt deliberate. "They're probably deer," Tyler whispered, though his grip on the journal was white-knuckled. "But deer don't circle." The noises came again. A crunch here, a crack there. Always just out of sight. Always moving around us. We backed closer together. The journal pressed between us like proof we weren't imagining things. My throat was dry, every instinct telling me to run, but I didn't know where to. Then Jess pointed, her voice sharp. There, between two trees, maybe 30 feet away, something shifted. At first, I thought it was just the sway of branches in the wind. But then I realized there was no wind. It was tall, too tall. Its outline barely distinct in the dim light, but unmistakably human-shaped. And it was standing perfectly still. We stumbled back, and when we looked again, it was gone. The forest erupted then, not with sound, but with silence so thick it felt like it pressed against our ears. And in that silence, I swear I heard it, breathing, low, drawn out, from the tree line itself. That broke us. We ran, crashing through brush, branches clawing at our arms. The journal slipped from Tyler's hands at some point, but none of us dared to stop for it. We didn't speak, didn't look back, not until we burst out onto Tyler's property, gasping like we'd been underwater. We made it back to his house, slamming the doors and locking them, our chests heaving. Nobody spoke for a long time. Eventually, Mark broke the silence. "We're not going back for it. Ever." And we didn't. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that last page, the words scrawled in a shaking hand. They're watching right now. And I wonder if, when we found it, the writer had been somewhere close, watching us. From the trees. I woke to the crackle of dying firewood and the sight of 3 figures standing motionless at the edge of the trees. I'd gone camping alone that weekend, deep into a national forest where few people ever ventured. I liked the quiet, the distance from everything. By the time I set up camp, the sun had gone down, and the only light came from my small fire. I ate, read by flashlight, and eventually drifted off in my sleeping bag beside the flames. Sometime in the night, I woke up. The fire had burned low, just glowing embers and the occasional snap of a log. At first, I thought it was the cold that had woken me, but then I saw them. 3 shapes stood just beyond the circle of light. At first, I thought they were trees or stumps, but the longer I stared, the clearer it became. They were people, or at least shaped like people. They didn't move. My breath caught in my throat. I sat perfectly still, not daring to reach for my flashlight. The figures stood just beyond the fire's reach, where the shadows swallowed their details. All I could see were silhouettes tall, thin, slightly hunched. I waited for one of them to say something, to step forward. Nothing. The night air felt colder by the second, seeping through my clothes. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I whispered a shaky hello. No response. The fire popped, sparks drifting upward, briefly illuminating their outlines. They weren't holding anything. They weren't moving. They were just watching. I told myself it was some weird prank. Other campers, maybe? Locals trying to scare me. But who stands silent in the woods all night without moving? Minutes crawled into hours. Every time I blinked, I half expected them to be closer. But they never moved. Not once. I tried not to look at them, curling back into my sleeping bag, but I couldn't stop glancing up. Their silhouettes stayed fixed, as though the forest itself had grown 3 new statues. The worst part wasn't that they were standing there. It was the feeling of being studied. Sometime after midnight, I heard something. A low hum, faint, carried on the wind. It wasn't words, not exactly just a vibration that made my skin prickle. I thought it might be in my head, until I saw one of the figures tilt its head slightly, like it had acknowledged me. I pulled the sleeping bag over my head, heart racing so fast I thought I'd pass out. Every second dragged on forever. By the time a gray light began bleeding through the trees, I was still frozen, still staring at the same 3 shapes. And then it happened. As the first rays of morning touched the clearing, I blinked just for a second. When I looked again, they were gone. No footsteps, no rustle of branches, just empty forest. I leapt up, stumbling toward the tree line, scanning the ground. Nothing, not a single track. It was like they had never been there at all. I packed my gear in a frenzy, hardly able to breathe until I was back at my car. I told myself I'd never camp there again. But sometimes, late at night, I'll be lying in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, and I'll feel it again, that heavy weight of unseen eyes. And I wonder if they're still out there, waiting. The car looked like it had been rotting in the woods for decades, yet when I touched the hood, it was still warm. I'd gone hiking alone that weekend, hoping to clear my head. The forest I picked wasn't marked by many trails, just an expanse of pines and ridges where you could walk for hours without seeing another soul. That's what I wanted: silence, distance. By late afternoon, the sun hung low, turning the light between the trees to a dull gold. That's when I saw the glint of metal through the underbrush. Curiosity pulled me closer. Hidden between clusters of vines and saplings was a car, an old sedan, maybe from the 70s. Its once blue paint was eaten away with rust, the windshield clouded with grime. Branches had grown through the frame, roots curling under the tires as if the forest had been reclaiming it for years. But something was wrong. As I reached out and touched the hood, I felt heat. Not faint, not residual from the sun warmth, like it had just been running. I yanked my hand back, heart lurching. I circled the car, looking for signs of life. The driver's door was shut, vines threading through the handle. the kind of growth that doesn't happen overnight. The tires were flat, shredded, yet the air around the car shimmered faintly, as though it radiated heat. I tried the door. To my surprise, it opened with a groan. The smell hit me immediately musty, metallic, like wet earth mixed with old gasoline. The inside was worse than the outside. Upholstery torn to rags, moss growing across the seats, spiderwebs glistening in the corners. The steering wheel crumbled when I brushed my fingers over it, but the dash clock glowed faintly green. 4:12. My skin prickled. There was no way it had power. I shut the door and stepped back, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. That's when I noticed the ground behind the car. Footprints, bare feet, pressed deep into the mud. They trailed away from the driver's side door and into the forest. "Hello?" I called out, my voice catching in my throat. The woods swallowed the sound. I followed the prints a few steps before stopping. They didn't lead anywhere. After just a dozen paces, they vanished. No scatter of leaves, no bent grass. Just gone. I hurried back to the car, pulse pounding, only to freeze in place. The driver's side door was open again. I was certain I'd closed it. The forest had grown quieter now. No birds, no rustling. Just a heavy, pressing silence. Then came the sound. A faint tick, tick. The cooling sound of an engine, coming from the rusted car. That was enough. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over roots, and started toward the direction I'd come. The trees felt tighter, the shadows heavier. Every step felt like it was being mirrored, echoed faintly behind me. I glanced back once. The car's headlights glowed faintly in the dimming woods. They were aimed at me. Panic surged, and I ran. Branches whipped against my arms, the ground uneven beneath my boots. I didn't stop until I broke through the tree line and saw the pale strip of road where my own car waited. I drove away shaking, refusing to look back at the forest. But that night, when I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something that froze me all over again. On the hood of my car, clear as day, were two muddy handprints. Bare, human, and they were still warm. The first shoe I found was a muddy work boot. The last one was small enough to fit a toddler. I'd gone hiking late, later than I should have. The sun had dipped behind the ridge before I even realized how quickly the forest was getting dark. I wasn't worried at first. My flashlight was strong, my pack stocked, but the woods take on a different kind of silence at night. Every sound echoes. Every shadow feels heavier. About half an hour into my walk back, my beam landed on something odd lying in the middle of the trail. A boot. A single, worn, mud-stained work boot, its laces untied and frayed. I paused, scanning the trees. Nobody else was supposed to be out here. I nudged the boot with my foot, half expecting someone to call out, claim it, step from the shadows. Nothing. I kept walking. 5 minutes later, I found another shoe. This time, a black sneaker. Just one. It was smaller than the boot, caked with dirt, the sole worn almost flat. A chill worked its way through me. 2 lost shoes, fine. But 2 different shoes, left in the same stretch of trail, didn't make sense. I told myself not to overthink it, but when I found the third, my stomach turned. A woman's flat, scuffed, torn at the heel. A few yards ahead, a child's Velcro sneaker, its strap hanging loose. Each one smaller than the last, placed almost deliberately in a line down the path. I slowed, scanning both sides of the trail with my light. The forest was still. Too still. The usual nighttime chorus of crickets and frogs had gone silent. The beam of my flashlight jittered as my hand shook. Every instinct told me to turn back, but something made me keep going, as if the trail itself was pulling me deeper. The next shoe was a baby's. Tiny, barely bigger than my palm. I crouched, staring at it. The fabric was damp, stained dark, the Velcro strap torn clean off. My throat tightened because I realized I'd stopped breathing. That's when I heard it, a shuffle, behind me. I spun, light sweeping across the trees. Nothing, just endless black trunks and the faint glint of leaves. I turned back, and the shoes were gone, all of them. The boot, the sneaker, the flats, even the tiny baby shoe. The trail was bare. Panic surged through me. I aimed the light further down the path and froze. There they were again, all of them. Not where I'd found them, but farther ahead now, neatly arranged in the same order, leading deeper into the woods. The silence pressed in, so heavy I could hear my pulse in my ears. My legs wanted to run, but my body wouldn't move. Then came the sound, soft, wet, like bare feet slapping against damp earth. From the trail ahead, I lifted the light, my breath shaking, and for the briefest moment, I saw them, figures, 3 of them, standing just beyond the reach of the beam. Too thin, too tall, their heads bent low like they were watching me from the shadows. The light flickered, and they were gone. The shoes, too. I ran then, full sprint, crashing through the dark, branches whipping across my arms and face. I didn't care about the noise, didn't care about the risk of twisting an ankle. I just needed out. When I finally stumbled into the trailhead parking lot, gasping and drenched in sweat, my car was the only one there. The woods behind me were silent, empty, as though nothing had happened. I threw my gear in the car and drove, not daring to glance in the rearview. But when I got home, hours later, something made me stop cold before stepping inside. Sitting neatly in the middle of my front porch was a single shoe. Small, child-sized, and it was wet with fresh mud.